I'd like to invite Mr. Mihir Gandhi, PwC, to moderate the upcoming panel discussion, along with Mr. Ajay Rajan, Yes Bank, Mr. Dewang Neralla, Entity Data Payment Services India, and Mr. Manish Gadia from Vayana.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending the session. It's been, interesting time with the launch of the digital rupee in India, and this was in the works for quite some time. So today, the topic that we're going to cover is how is CBDC or digital rupee in India going to transform the way banking and fintech overall is done in India, the overall ecosystem, and what impact it has for the key players. What are the technology that is involved? What are the key risks that we are talking about? So that's what we're going to look at and cover today. With me, I have Ajay. Maybe Ajay, if you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Mihir, and good to be here. So my name is Ajay Rajan, and I manage the transaction banking and the digital bank.
To be a part of this panel, it's a new topic out there, absolutely, and something out of the blue for all of us, especially from the acquiring side. I am Dewang Neralla. I head Entity Data Payment Services. We are a payment aggregator, so I think we're looking forward to the session right now.
Manish.
Yeah, thanks, Mihir. Hi, guys. Good afternoon. This is Manish. I'm from Vayana, which is amongst the largest fintechs in India. I manage the emerging technologies division of Vayana. Thank you.
So we have a good mix of banker, a payment fintech company, and a B2B payments company, Vayana, which is there today. So it's going to be very interesting to hear different views. I'm Mihir Gandhi. I'm a partner with PwC, and I focus on the payments transformation kind of business over there. So the first question I wanted to start with opening question is, how is CBDC or digital rupee different from a normal kind of payment channels? We have been looking at, UPI is more of a rail, which is on overlay on top of a bank account. But with a CBDC or a e-rupee coming in, and maybe Ajay, if you can take this one, how is it going to kind of change the landscape of how payment railroads are existing today? Is it going to talk to them? Is it going to be different? And this is a question even I get asked so many times by different people. So maybe wanted to hear your views on this.
Sure. So I think the first fundamental, point that we need to understand is that CBDC is not digital money. So India and some of these questions we get asked in India that UPI is there. Why do we need CBDC? It's probably and we should thank God for this, that we are actually having a very evolved digital payment model in the country as compared to any of the other countries, right? So we have been having instant payments for more than a decade now. IMPS was always there, and on top of that, then we launched UPI. So hence, the question is very logical that if UPI is there, then why CBDC, right? But one fundamental point I think which we should realize is, while UPI is another form of digital money, that means money in your bank account is being transacted through a form factor called UPI. CBDC is money itself. So it is a legal tender. It is akin to cash, which is issued by the Reserve Bank of India. And CBDC is the digital version of cash itself, right? So that is first and foremost the difference between what we, when we say UPI versus CBDC, etc. That fundamentally, I think that's the first thing that we should understand, right? So in terms of legality, in terms of trust factor, CBDC will be above anything else that we have in the country. In a country like India, when UPI was launched, it is not that UPI scored over or bought volumes from other payment factors in the country, right? IMPS also saw good growth. NEFT also saw good growth. RTGS also saw good growth. And UPI obviously saw phenomenal growth, right? Because of the frictionless way that UPI could be transacted. We should see CBDC as another form factor for transacting. It brings a lot of added features as compared to UPI. Of course, it is instant, it is final, which is what you associate UPI with, right? UPI also, there is an instant gratification when you transact through UPI. But the difference is that in a P2P, that holds good. In a P2M, while the information to the merchant goes instant, the money goes T+1. In CBDC, because the money is token based, right? The transaction is transacted and closed instantly. So that's the fundamental difference between UPI and CBDC, purely from a merchant standpoint. And we will talk about further use cases as we go during this session. But there are a lot of other use cases where I believe that CBDC could add a lot of value to the overall payment ecosystem in the country.
Thanks, Ajay. I think very, very important to understand the difference between legal tender and payment rail, which you explained very beautifully. So thanks so much for that. I think it's a very fundamental question which a lot of us get asked, but thank you for clarifying. Dewang, if I move to you, maybe if you want to add something on this, but specifically I wanted to ask you the role of different stakeholders, right, in promoting CBDC, right? Today we have banks, which are largely the first cohort of participants that have come into the fray, and they are kind of issuing a bank account, issuing CBDC based currency, and you can actually transact that. I was at few of the pilot banks, including Yes Bank, and what they have done is, they have made a closed user group where the employees to buy something at the cafeteria or something can only scan and pay now by a CBDC kind of wallet or, it's accept. So that's a very interesting case. But Dewang, from your perspective, you are in the ecosystem space and you are outside of the traditional banking, but you are on the payments and fintech side. So how do you think you can play a role in promoting CBDC, or how do you think your ecosystem will actually go forward with CBDC coming into play?
I think if you ask me, fundamentally, like for example, when you look at payment aggregation, because that's the fundamental basis on which what we have been established. Payment aggregation rides on top of bank, because people are, of course, having some sort of misnomer that for payment aggregation, we are carrying transactional risk, we are providing service to the merchants out there and the businesses, not to the end consumers, technically speaking. So when you look at from a payment aggregation and a consumer space out there, the role that we'll be playing is very critical in terms of if you want adoption of CBDCs to take place across the merchant outlet, because effectively P2P, okay, you can do P2P using your normal banking channels, but if you want to do P2 merchant, person to merchant kind of payments, effectively aggregation and including the acquiring banks will play an increasing role out there. How this thing is going to be delivered, for example, you have currently UPI QR, you have a e-rupee QR also out there. This would be sitting on as a parallel channel out there. Tomorrow, like for example, RBI has also permitted offline payments now up to 200 rupees. Now, why does an RBI need to keep it at 200 rupees? The limit could be 20,000 up to whatever income tax limits are there, because as long as there's a wallet riding on your phone, basically you can easily make a payment using that kind of a currency. A lot of people are maybe who are end consumers or some people who are not comfortable putting in money into a bank account. They would prefer that because you need to have those withdrawal limits and everything else. They would prefer to put it as on a CBDC kind of a framework. And that's where those are the kind of population that will come down, very handy for them to start making payments on those kind of merchant orders. So effectively the role of our aggregator would be continuing the way it is right now. The way aggregators and acquiring banks have energized the entire merchant ecosystem, I think the same role will continue. This will be one more basically a channel out there.
So more like a payment, more that you will accept on
Absolutely.
your aggregating platform for merchant transactions.
Absolutely. And in this case, what happens is, as Ajay was talking about, the settlements are going to be real time out there. So the settlements are going to be, that's something we would need to understand how this rails would operate, because when you are a payment aggregator, you're working on the nodal or escrow account and you're having the money going to the merchant on T+1 day, whereas when you're doing, this is actual currency. Currency is you're having an exchange. Instead of physical cash, you're doing a virtual cash out there. So if you're doing physical virtual currencies out there, with that whole settlement portion has to be worked out. How do you do that? Because would the money transition from, let's say, from the person to the aggregator to the merchant, or will it go directly to the merchant? And where the aggregators will be only as a kind of a technology provider. I think that will evolve over a period of time. I think those things, those sort of experiences will evolve over a period of time. And again, from the experience point of view, you would not want to break in that experience. You want to ensure that there is as much frictionless experience, as much clean experience for the consumer and as well as the business running behind it.
Correct.
But this is on the domestic side of it. But the interesting use case could be even cross-border also, because you're talking about domestic. So for example, today morning, Pay Now, I think we had done, Prime Minister had launched India and Singapore kind of bilateral for Pay Now. That's basically real-time payment between and cross-border remittance out there. Can this be used as a medium for cross-border remittance out there and to either purchase or do something out there? Because you're not looking and waiting for a settlement. This is a legal tender. It becomes easier to transfer money outside or do things around that. So I think a lot more other use cases will evolve over a period of time, or not only on basically domestic side, but also on cross-border fintech also.
Understood. Thanks Dewang. Thanks for the insights. I think very useful to understand how a payment aggregator will have to interlink with the bank and then, accept all the CBDC payments, and also the settlement point which you raised is very important because it has to be done real time. So thanks for that. And also the use cases that you mentioned, right? So international cross-border remittances is a big use case, which is the fundamental premise why a lot of countries globally are thinking about migrating to a digital kind of currency, right? I think like Bahamas has already launched their currency. China has launched it in a limited way. US is still thinking, but US is like many years behind. Like what Ajay said, India is the poster boy of payments, and all the other Western countries actually look up to us in that sense. So I think international remittances is going to be a big use case, parallel system to SWIFT. In fact, what I also hear is that SWIFT has already started creating a platform for digital currencies where, entities countries can hook up their digital currencies and, use. So SWIFT doesn't want to lose that kind of place that they have created.
So it's real-time money transfer. I don't know if you looked at looking at forex markets earlier on.
Yeah.
You had a concept called continuous link settlements. Yeah. I think this is going to be very important for any kind of businesses when you're looking at real-time settlements happening. Because SWIFT is traditionally been a kind of a batch model.
Absolutely.
You're moving from a batch to a real-time construct.
Absolutely.
And you're trying to replace what Ripple is trying to do with actually a CBDC being there.
Absolutely.
And you're disintermediating the whole. You're in fact disintermediating banking also. Correct. See, today there is a correspondent bank, you have dollar nostros, actually you don't need any of that. The second is, the whole foreign exchange market will also see a very tectonic shift in terms of how you transact currencies. Because today there is a cash pot, money comes in 2 days later, it comes after deduction of pricing, etc., right? With CBDC, it is the regulator talking to the other regulator. There will be FX conversion formula, and the payment, whether it is P2P, and India is a $100 billion P2P remittance market today, right? And it's only growing. The B2B, of course, is a huge white space where export-import remittances or other capital market remittances happen, right? So the amount of disruption and innovation which can come on cross-border usage of CBDC is going to be absolutely mind-boggling.
Absolutely. No, it's a very interesting point because when we think of cross-border, we always think about retail CBDCs, but the wholesale CBDCs which is launched is a great opportunity.
Yeah, so Mihir, just wanted to add to the cross-border bit. So, some stats, I was just checking, in fact, last year, about $120 billion of inefficiency as well as fees was just paid from the cross-border remittances perspective. That's the loss we are having in cross-border remittances. And take a simple example. If a company, let's say PwC India, has to send a remittance to PwC USA, the friction points. Okay, first of all, your existing bank, the FX rate, the nostros, the inward remittances, then they will come in. The beneficiary's bank. So typically it would take at least 1 to 2 days from a remittance perspective. The loss as well, the time loss, the FX losses as well. So CBDC, obviously the current rails were not able to remove that friction, which is where the cross-border CBDC will play the part. About 95% of countries are typically at various stages of deploying CBDC. Correct. Now, a lot of them have various technologies. For example, India, we are using a hybrid technology, API as well as a Hyperledger blockchain fabric. Some of the countries in Latin may not be using a blockchain altogether. So the point which you made about SWIFT, they've launched something called as a CBDC connector, where they've had multiple technologies connect using CBDC connector, and real-time transaction of cross-border remittances have taken place. So they have proven that it works, certainly. Just wanted to add few more points, and I'll take the liberty in adding to Dewang's point about how fintech can play a role with respect to CBDC. So one interesting point he mentioned about distribution. So from a retail perspective, I mean, we were in East UP as well as Madhya Pradesh villages doing some sort of research last time, about a couple of months back. Wherever we would go, we would only see the new trinity, which is Paytm, PhonePe as well as Jio 4G. Okay, so I mean, you don't see banks there, but you see Paytm, PhonePe as well as Jio 4G connections. So if retail CBDC has to be taken to bottom of the pyramid from a financial inclusion perspective, that is where distribution partners, fintechs would play a very important part. So yeah, and just to another point of Ajay mentioning the difference between UPI versus CBDC, just wanted to add an invisible factor. To me, whilst Ajay has pointed out the visible factors between UPI, CBDC as well as NEFT, IMPS, to me the invisible factor, which is the intermediaries, would be less number with respect to CBDC. There would be higher degree of centralization, higher degree of control, which would lead to a lot of cost savings, and which is where from an economic perspective, CBDC will be a more viable retail kind of a solution than even UPI. So just wanted to put some of the points across.
I'd just like to add on one thing. One use case which we looked at was financial inclusion. We had JAM Trinity out there, right? Jandan Aadhaar and mobile. Now, if you look at most of the Jandan accounts are inactive accounts. Now think of banks. Why would a bank need to open up a Jandan account if you could go down and give the same money as a form of CBDC? Ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody has a mobile out there. Correct. You do not open up a bank account. You're not burdening your banking system per se. And this is legal tender, because today, for example, there is a kind of a fear cycle. A lot of times, a lot of these guys put money in a bank account, they get DBT and everything. Coming into a bank account, they withdraw the money. Because purely for the security of that cash out there. Because what if the bank goes down? The trust quotient out there. Like, see, people have to, let's be clear in this country, the only bank which is really, really trusted is SBI. There are only two institutions that people trust in this country is SBI and LIC. No other way. At the rural level, they don't trust anything, because that's how people have basically been, like, the whole mind has been basically created out there. So idea is basically if we can give that sort of a use case, that will really help for them. I'm just giving a string of ideas.
Absolutely. No, thanks Manish, and thanks Dewang for adding on to it. Specifically in the Indian context, maybe Ajay, if you want to take this, what are the different use cases? We already spoke about few of them, but Indian context, like one is obviously programmable payments where you can, kind of program your money. But what do you see? And you are one of the first bank that has launched this in the Indian scenario. So what are the use cases for retail CBDC to pick up in India?
See, it's a pilot which is 3 months underway, right? So broadly, 2 use cases have been piloted or started with. One is P2P, which is me sending money to you and so on and so forth. And
both need to have a wallet, CBDC wallet.
The primary, okay, so let's just maybe break down and understand how CBDC works, right? So like I mentioned in the first statement, it is akin to cash. So just like Reserve Bank of India today prints cash and gives cash in the hands of the consumers via banks, who are the custodian of that cash, right? So you go to a branch or you go to and withdraw from an ATM, right? So the same is the model for CBDC. You need to have a bank account. You need to download the CBDC app. You need to link your bank account to the CBDC wallet, and then thereafter, actually, you can from the bank which is issuing the CBDC wallet. So right now it was 4, then it became 8 banks now. After that, the loading of money into the wallet can be done by any of your bank account, irrespective whether they are participating in CBDC or not, right? So that's how you load your CBDC wallet. Thereafter, you can transact between people who are having a CBDC wallet. So it's a P2P. So the other person who you are sending or receiving money via CBDC wallet also needs to have CBDC, right? While it is not yet done, but eventually the benefit which of anonymity which is there in cash is up to 50,000, no questions asked, do what transactions you want, etc. All of that will get applicable for CBDC, right? The Reserve Bank also made this statement that they are exploring technical anonymity and regulatory anonymity to take care of that factor. So that itself is a fundamental difference versus UPI, right? Today, a 10 rupee juice or a 20 rupee cigarette, everything comes in your bank statement, right? Tomorrow, CBDC, you just have one debit to your account, loading into CBDC, and then thereafter, what you do from that money is actually completely anonymous, right? Then comes the P2M, which is where today, every bank is going and onboarding merchants onto CBDC. Like Dewang mentioned, there is a separate UPI QR code. However, going forward, I expect that this QR code will become interoperable with UPI QR code. So what will then happen is that you no longer then need to really onboard merchants. Technically, all the merchants will get automatically juxtaposed to CBDC, but that's still some time to come. But eventually, that is going to be the way forward, right? You cannot expect a merchant to have a UPI QR, then a CBDC QR, and so on and so forth. So eventually, everything will become interoperable. Now, recently, the Reserve Bank also allowed for e-commerce aggregators. So payment aggregators are still not allowed to touch CBDC. E-commerce aggregators are now allowed to handle CBDC. So Amazon or a Uber or a Swiggy, Ola, Zomato, etc. can now open CBDC wallets, and you can order on any of these e-com websites using CBDC. So this is a use case which has now got introduced. The subsequent use cases is definitely going to be cross-border remittances. The other very critical use case which is going to happen is, like you mentioned, the programmability of rupee. Now, because this money is owned by Reserve Bank of India, they can actually program the money for usage, right? So if it's a DBT transfer, subsidy transfer, any specific COVID relief, for example, right, only to buy vaccines. So you can actually send the money directly to the wallet, and then you can program it in a way that this can only be used for the purpose for which it was sent. This is something which you cannot do with any other form factor of money, right? So it is cheap, it is instant, and it can be programmed. So this is where then the ecosystem of banks, fintechs, all of this, will actually now look at how do we create some use cases on top of CBDC. See, this is going to be the only payment instrument in the country which is going to give you instant and free. While UPI today technically is free, it is artificially free because there is a restriction for you to charge.
Yes.
And the government is subsidizing almost close to 3,000 crores.
Correct.
To banks and fintechs and everyone, to the ecosystem for UPI. When CBDC becomes widely proliferated, there is no reason for subsidization, right? You can always say, this is my money, this is free, anything else, let the market decide what you need to charge.
Correct.
So then automatically you know that how the behavior of people towards using a certain payment mode, will automatically shift, right?
Correct.
The last use case which I want to maybe table here, there are of course many others, but very critical of the genesis of CBDC is that UPI or any other payment it depends on network. So that means you need to have internet connectivity, you need to have a smartphone to do UPI, right? CBDC in its end state is expected to be offline and low network or no network. That is going to be the key differentiator. Dewang, I think, very nicely put it up in his statement that today when you go to tier 5, tier 6, right, or even if you go to some senior citizens, right, there is a low trust factor for some private wallets or private players, right? Whereas when you go there and say that, okay, this is where Reserve Bank is transferring you your direct benefit transfers, this is currency owned by Reserve Bank of India, given to you through a bank, but this is Reserve Bank commitment to you, and it can be programmed.
It's a legal tender.
Exactly, right? So that's going to be the programmability with the trust factor being taken care of is going to be the biggest use case where money is in the hands of people for them to use it in a very free economic manner, right? And the point I was trying to tell you is, this is going to be the only instrument which will give you instant at no cost.
Correct.
Rest of everything will be market driven, whether it is IMPS, NEFT, maybe UPI, etc.
Do you also see like other products like lending and all happening through the CBDC platform going forward? Again, that can be a use case that can.
You're absolutely right. Again, early days, but MFI, for example, right? And we were Manish talking outside, right? So MFI could be a potential use case because MFI today very largely is still a cash industry, right? That is where you can use CBDC, because those are the people who also have usage, they can use it in CBDC, right? So there will definitely be use cases around lending. Right now, it's not allowed, but I definitely see that, over the next couple of years,
It will happen.
it will definitely.
It will make the entire transaction very smooth.
You are absolutely right.
Mihir, just wanted to add a couple of things to what Ajay has just mentioned. So these are from the future use cases perspective and in the near future. Okay, so model law for electronic trade records, M-letter, okay, is accepted by 5 countries currently. What it is, it mandates digitization of title of good trade documents. Around 14% of currently bill of lading are digitized, only 14%. English Parliament is supposed to pass this law in about next 6 months. About 80 countries follow English law, okay, who will kind of follow the English law passage of this particular law. And that is where you will see true digitization of trade coming in. And which is where the programmable aspect of CBDC will play an important part. So you can program it that, okay, once the bill of lading is dispatched, maybe then you can release the money, which is locked, the CBDC, which is locked in that contract. So that is one more immediate use case. It will revolutionize the trade, the remittances as well as the digitization of trade. Ajay mentioned about microfinance that we were talking. Currently in the pilot stage, the entry barriers are very high. I need to have a bank account. Okay, if I need to go to the bottom of the pyramid, maybe something to think about is, can I remove the entry barrier from a bank account to something called as a light KYC, which may be just a liveness check. Give them 25,000 of allowance from a CBDC's perspective and ensure you hold them from a journey perspective. So let's say bottom of the pyramid guy comes in, does CBDC, once he grows big, moves on to a bank account and takes up developed channels such as UPI and EFT and all. So these are some of the use cases that we can talk about from a retail and wholesale perspective as well.
Sure. I just want to correct one thing. The programmability is going to be only with the regulator, because it's regulator's money. Okay. They can program it. Okay. At least I don't envisage a situation where a third party, including even a bank, will be able to program CBDC.
Okay. So for example, if a bank says I want to remove a product for an education institution where the children are given a wallet to buy only, say, books or food from a cafeteria, would that be allowed as a product, or no, that is still under the regulator?
So again, as I said, right now, at least...
So just a hypothetical situation.
No, hypothetically, you are absolutely right. Yeah. If the Reserve Bank tomorrow gives the right to program the money to third parties.
To the issuers, which are the banks, basically. Or
we are issuers on behalf of Reserve
Bank. Correct.
So we are only a custodian.
Correct.
The money is Reserve Bank of India.
Correct.
Right? Which is why I said, right now at least the programmability is expected to be at the hands of the regulator.
Bank, okay.
But you are absolutely right. If there is a further delegation of that in a controlled environment, the amount of use cases can be phenomenal. Like, some Manish gave for certain examples, you gave absolutely the right example. So this all can be built. But for that, I would also think that the underlying CBDC architecture on blockchain would be a very critical factor. See, today, CBDC works on a hybrid model, right? The upper layer between Reserve Bank and the bank works on blockchain, whereas the bank to consumer works on API.
Correct.
So the programmability will, in my view, happen when everything comes under blockchain. And then, of course, how comfortable the regulator is, to give for under what threshold, maybe some level of programmability, flexibility to maybe the entire ecosystem.
Sure. Dewang, you want to add any views? Okay. So I wanted to understand a bit more. Thanks, Ajay, for your views. Manish, you were talking about the use cases, right? And you are into B2B and, wholesale and stuff. So in India today, on the CBDC side, there is technically only 1 or 2 use cases that has been allowed or permitted, which is for the government securities trading, right? GSEC trading and the... So what are the additional use cases on the B2B or the wholesale side you see coming up, which will be different from the retail that we've spoken about a lot of cases on the retail side? You spoke about the international bill payments and all, but I'm talking about more domestic on the wholesale side.
So Mihir, again, as Ajay rightly mentioned, currently the programmability is with RBI, but again, I'm envisaging a future scenario. Okay, if you really want a true form of CBDC, which comes in which most of the other countries seems to be going ahead with. Immediate scenario which we can think of is, in fact, I used to be a banker earlier, and we tried solving this, a deep tier supply chain finance. A deep tier supply chain finance.
Okay.
What if an anchor releases the money? Okay, but that money does not go to his first supplier. A part of it goes to the first supplier, a part of it goes to supplier, and thereon. So the anchor is not just enabling his first supplier, he's enabling his entire extended supply chain. Okay, so currently in the scheme of things, because money cannot be programmed, there are a lot of accountancy and other related errors. Maybe in the future, again, I can envisage if I get control over the money, that is something which I can achieve. So that is something which I can think of at the moment from a domestic perspective. But again, Mihir, I think cross-border from a B2B perspective would be the key.
So to your question specifically on the wholesale side, right? Retail, I think we've all spoken enough about. Wholesale, I think what we should realize is wholesale is a settlement between banks.
Right.
So wholesale CBD, wherever bank-to-bank settlement is happening, is where wholesale will have a value, right? So today it started with GSEC trading. Call money market where banks borrow, lend between themselves could also be a use case. Your LC settlements or export-import settlements between banks can also be a use case. Practically any area, and the whole wholesale CBDC is actually on blockchain infrastructure.
Okay.
So this is where you can actually build
a
a lot of use cases to give instant finality. So today, again, if you look at how banks settle between each other, is through an account which is held in Reserve Bank of India.
Correct.
Right? So there is also a time lag to it, there is a process to it.
Correct.
All of that gets eliminated when you do a direct bank-to-bank settlement. So if I have to borrow from ICICI Bank, I can simply just do a immediate instant settlement between the two banks with the system of records also getting updated real time, right? So any of these settlement, direct settlement, which banks do between themselves is a classical wholesale CBDC use case.
Perfect.
Just one more thing I could just remember, Mihir, was at the moment, if let's say me as a business, I want some sort of a guarantee from another business. Okay, it happens in a banking world where we make them sign something called as a demand promissory note. Okay, blockchain is akin to a public notarized ledger, at least in few of the other countries. Okay, maybe the programmability bit can be attached to this digitized promissory notes as well, wherein the moment I get this short-term debt instrument, bank can come in and discount that particular bit from a CBDC's perspective as well. So these are a few other, these are again, some of this have been, the reason I'm saying this is because some of them have been practiced. So there is a Switzerland company which has done this in 8 countries already. So it's not like it has not happened, it's happened world over. If the regulator wants that to happen in India perspective as well, it can surely happen.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you so much, Manish. Dewang, just coming to you, what do you feel are the risks or challenges of a CBDC-like system in India or even across the world, from a digital rupee perspective? Do you see any risks are there or any challenges? Like in a typical currency, you have a digital way, you have a challenge of a security or a hack or something like that. Do you see that actually coming up in this scenario?
I think those typical technology challenges will be there always. I think we've seen enough incidences of where people are hacked into crypto ledgers and stolen the tokens.
Wow.
And if that has happened for basically
and that's based on the same blockchain kind of technology.
Same blockchain, and basically people have just taken over the entire this thing. And so so there are two things. One is basically stealing, and second is impersonation. Now the bigger fear out there is, technically speaking, somebody can run a parallel payment system and go down and fleece the people into believing that they're running a proper payment system and take over the entire money out of the whole system. It may not have been on block. It did not have be blockchain at all. It could be saying, I can just impersonate a Yes Bank kind of an application out there. So I am from Yes Bank, I'm giving you an application. Why don't you load your money onto this? There are millions of people who could be defrauded out of that. I think that's something we need to, the whole security bit is something where the whole thing, challenge is going to come in. And I think those are going to come in when you start evolving this. It's like, for example, you look at your currency notes, you have this issue of counterfeiting and everything else. Here is going to be impersonation, because it's anything that is digital, you're going to have impersonations coming. People talk about SIM cloning, people talk about other things. So a lot of other things, all those factors are going to come. So I think protection of the vault is going to be very, very critical out there. impersonation, how do you avoid that? How do you ensure that the right kind of education goes down? Because it's a question of not only technology, but also a question of education. Whom do you trust and whom do you not trust? Right? Like for example, you have a hologram on certain things right now when you buy that original seal out there. So same kind of an effect you would need to create when you're trying to do with anything to do with CBDC. So I think from a retail side, this is where I think, and that's a very, very tricky thing, because from a wholesale or from a B2B side of it, it's a lot easier because you're not leading to so many complex situations out there.
And it's on a more stable technology,
Absolutely.
blockchain, what Ajay was referring.
But when you go into retail, I think a lot more challenges will come in with respect to security, and that is where I think it's going to take some amount of time where people start actually believing and start using that. Because again, the basic feeling is, for example, when people started using UPI or maybe any of these channels earlier was, am I going to be, is it safe to use this application right now? Now, people have got that comfort right now, given that so many, I think there's a super job being done by all these guys, right from Paytm to PhonePe to Google Pay, and including the banks and everybody else, so percolating UPI down to the last person or last mile out there. I think similar kind of an effect would need to be done with CBDC also.
Correct.
So I think, yes, so I said there are two risks clearly out there. Other than that, I think as the risk evolve out, unless and until you come out with something new, I think a lot more technology itself will pose a lot more new challenges later on.
Sure. Thanks so much, Dewang. Thank you so much. So I think just we are just coming on time. So just from a future perspective or any last words on CBDC, maybe Ajay, starting with you. You already been in the thick of action, but what do you see coming forward for us?
I am very bullish on CBDC because again, as I said, it's very good for the country. We spend almost 6,000 crores on printing and managing cash. Exactly. And if you then count the value of loss from counterfeit notes and all of those stuff, it can go into thousands of crores, right? So that is one. Second, even on your flagship product, there is a big subsidization which the government is actually paying, right? This is almost close to 3,000 crores. Aap ye dono ko hi total kar lo, you are spending almost 10,000, 12,000 crores only on managing this. Correct. Right? All of this saving can directly come in a payment mode which gives you instant gratification, it gives you finality, and it is free, and it is the most secured payment mode which is there in the country, right? Correct. So there are plethora of use cases which can be built on that. Of course, if you add the programmability and other things, right? Second, wholesale CBDC, as I mentioned, is hugely beneficial, and which of course is something which is not lost on any country. Everyone in almost 115 countries today are working on their version of CBDC. India started the last, and India, as expected, launched the quickest. The numbers are phenomenal. I don't want to announce on behalf of RBI, but there is a landmark number which may get breached in the next 1 or 2 days. Wow! So that's the kind of scale which even in a closed user group pilot,
it's happening.
CBDC is seen, right? It's been silent, but it's been very, very effective, right? So I believe that there is over the next few years, it will be a very, very potent and critical payment system in the country.
Awesome. Looking forward. Thank you so much, Ajay.
I think from a payment side, if you ask me, fairly excited to look at CBDC. Two things. One is basically it's going to disrupt the entire space in terms of some instrument being killed. Okay. I don't know. I would see the demise of prepaid, to be very honest. I don't know. Why would you need a prepaid when you have CBDC? When you have currency, like you give an example of a children, right? Child out there going to school. Earlier we were trying to get out use cases. Or wallet. You can, rather than giving a prepaid card, and parents, even you are worried about prepaid card getting lost or something else, you say, why not load the currency directly out there? Including, for example, all of us living in cities are like so-called affluents out there, middle class. We have people working for us, housemates, servants, and everybody else. Now, to that class of people, when they go out to buy something outside, we give them cash. So instead of giving them cash, because either you give them a transfer money using UPI, or UPI can pose its own challenges with respect to income tax and other things, because we do not see those income tax challenges out there, because when you're giving UPI, you're saying, creating an entry out there and everything else. But in this case, you can just load the money out there and do that. So there's fairly exciting use cases that are going to come about there, I think, and that's where I think, as I said, there's going to be a mass disruption which is going to happen in terms of every level right now. So like I said, I don't know, personally I predict if CBDC is going to grow up really well, prepaid is going to be killed entirely. You don't need prepaid out there.
Right.
But of course, new use cases will come up, new things will come up, and from payment aggregation point of view, I would treat it like a pygmy collection. So earlier on, you had those pygmy collection. People would go down, carry those micro ATMs to collect monies from the people out there.
Yeah.
So instead of using those micro ATMs, they'll just carry mobile phones to collect CBDCs, the digital currencies out there. So it becomes, like for example, he spoke about MFI distributing cash or virtual cash.
And digital collection also.
Digital collection also. The whole
Even
collection.
in an offline setup, which he said
Absolutely,
is
absolutely. The whole offline setup.
Yeah.
And instead of doing what we call as MDR or transaction charge, you will say, okay, fine, this is my collection charge.
Correct.
1 rupee, 50 paisa or whatever. I think the whole model, business model, I think changed completely out there. Very exciting times, I would say that.
Thank you so much, Dewang. Thank you. Manish, any last comments from you?
Just final thoughts on a retail CBDC front first. Government will have to ensure that there are less errors. The reason being, if it doesn't work, the poor person is going to go home without his dinner. Okay, that is number one. I mean, he's going there to buy his dinner and it doesn't work, he's going to sleep without his dinner. So that's most important. It's going to be loss of trust. On a wholesale CBDC, government is leading the way from a digital asset rules perspective in G20. On a wholesale CBDC level, there is no global approach from a standardization perspective. Okay, everyone is firing a gun in a dark room. If there can be an initiative wherein a global CBDC standards comes up, that would be, that would be good. And finally, government considers crypto as everything which is digital. For example, a fiat-backed stablecoin also is considered as crypto. Government need to understand fiat-backed stablecoin is an indirect token representation of an asset and not a speculative crypto. It's about $22 billion of circulation at the moment, growth of about 2,000%. So certainly there are things working there. Government needs to learn from that. These are my final thoughts.
Great.
I have a very different view here. Anything which is unregulated is a no. You can call it whatever, but if it is not regulated, there is no use case there. And that is the fundamental discomfort of any regulator across the globe. You can put a layer on top of currency and say, okay, this is stable coin, this is pegged to XYZ or ABC. Sorry, doesn't work. The Reserve Bank, or it's not the Reserve Bank, the regulator does not allow any layer on top of their currency. That is final, right? So, and that exactly to solve for a use case in the way that people pictured or painted crypto is actually how CBDC was born, right? But this is a legal tender. It has
backed by the settlement.
Exactly. It is not volatile. It has a particular use case. It can be used for specific purpose, and that is the only currency which is there. Now they cannot be a layer on top of it and say that okay, no, this is how it will be programmed, etc. It is anything which will be done will be only done by the regulator, and that's how I think it should be as well.
Just
because
a small.
otherwise, then the problems of what Dewang mentioned in terms of people
Security,
abusing it, securing it, एक अलग app बना दिया, all of that, then issues and challenges will happen.
Just a small counter, Ajay. USDC, the second largest fiat reserve stablecoin, is SEC regulated. Okay, and they are going to get regulated in other nations as well. So SEC of US has regulated them.
Sure.
Because they don't have a CBDC. When they have a CBDC, then I think the question is whether they will still have it or not.
Great. No, but thanks. Very interesting points. Thank you, Ajay, Dewang, and Manish for your interesting points. I learned a lot today. I hope all of you have learned too. And it was a great discussion. Thanks once again. Thank you. We can ask for questions if we have time. Do we have time? Are there any questions from the audience? Sorry, I missed that. Thanks very much.
Hi, this is Ajay. Firstly, I think it was a very great panel, very insightful, rightly told by you, Mihir. The question that I had is, Ajay, you mentioned that the government is probably reaching a certain number already. So actually, I was very curious. My question, in fact, I had that already in mind. How is it that the government is going to incentivize this for a regular consumer? Because I'm not sure, if a regular consumer would want to go to his, app, link a CBDC, what is in it for the regular consumer, and of course we all know UPI is a big success. It's much easier. You don't have to do much. So just curious in terms of and this for the entire panel. Is there something you think is required firstly to do from a consumer perspective, or you think probably the Indian consumer is ready to just lap onto CBDC today?
See, if you look at the government or the regulators' thought process, is not to say that move from A to B. They have given you another form factor which they can manage as per the fiscal policy of the country, right? It has all the features which a top-notch payment instrument should have. Even, in fact, better than the payment instruments which are already existing in the country. Now, if you are incentivized to use it, please use it. If you are keen that नहीं यार मेरे को तो UPI अच्छा लगता है, मुझे वहाँ passback मिलता है, please use UPI, right? See, they have given you 3-4 options. You can use as you want, and if you actually look at it, right? People said UPI आएगा, wallet खत्म हो जाएगा, wallet आएगा, ये खत्म हो जाएगा, कुछ नहीं खत्म हुआ इंडिया में. Every payment instrument in the country has grown. Digital payments in the country itself has grown, right? So this will also find a niche. Again, as I said, right, today UPI is controlled by the regulator, so they can keep it free. They don't have to compensate anyone, right? Tomorrow, if they want to save the 3,000 crores which today is going as subsidy, they may just say, okay, market forces determine all the other payment modes. Let you decide what you want to charge for XYZ, right? So as a consumer, then what will you use? Second, if the Reserve Bank does think of compensating, they will save, or potentially they can save 5,000 to 6,000 crores, like I mentioned, right? They spend on currency printing, managing. If there is an intent to incentivize, they can always say, इस पे इतना मिलेगा, उतना मिलेगा. But I would be surprised if the regulator gets into those kind of incentive models. But there is nothing which stops them from doing it, if they want to.
I think as time evolves, the programmability of CBDC, which is a very important characteristics, we'll see a lot more use cases if the regulator allows issuers or banks, I would not say issuers.
आप fundamentally देखो, आप आज एक दुकान में you go to a shop, right? If you use cash, the दुकानदार will take cash. He will have to go to the bank, deposit the cash, or he has to have a cash management company come pick up the cash, etc. Right? 100 रुपए मिलता है, 100 के against में बैंक अकाउंट में पैसा T+1, T+2 में आता है, और 100 के अगेंस्ट 98 मिलता है. आप क्रेडिट कार्ड यूज़ करते हो, क्रेडिट कार्ड में 100 के अगेंस्ट 98 मिलता है, T+1, T+2 मिलता है. डेबिट कार्ड सेम थिंग, राइट? UPI right now free, but the money comes on T+1. This is the only instrument which will give you instant free. Now when you go to the shop, what will he drive your behavior towards? वो obviously आपको बोलेगा, आज भी तो यही बोलता है ना, सर कार्ड मशीन नहीं चल रहा है, आप UPI कर दो. Tomorrow he will say, सर वो UPI नहीं चल रहा है, आप CBDC कर दो.
I'll give you another perspective of this, slightly a kind of very radical kind of a thing. See, imagine you're in a scenario we've been told by, I don't know, at least I've been told by my fathers and everybody else, as you need to keep some cash at home. You cannot be entirely digital. So you cannot be entirely digital. You need to keep cash around. And this is a case of calamities out there. And I've seen that with my own cousins out there in Chennai when there were floods and on. They were very diligent, absolutely digital loving people, never had cash at home. Because of the caliber of floods out in Chennai, they were not able to get even basic food because they did not have cash at home. Thankfully, they were able to get some cash and they were able to do that. So in terms of calamities or anything else, you need some reserve cash at home. Now, cash is insecure. You're worried about somebody going and stealing your cash. Today, चोर आता है घर के अंदर, सबसे पहले क्या देखता है आपके घर में cash कितना पड़ा हुआ है, valuables, gold कितना पड़ा हुआ है, चोरी करके चले जाता है. In this case, if you have digital cash or virtual cash lying in, virtual currency lying there, वो क्या चोरी करके जाएगा? That locker, that vault is absolutely secure. So for you, from insecure cash, you're moving to a secure cash out there. So I think that's a different perspective I'm trying to roll out. That's not a traditional standard perspective, but a different thing.
Great. Any other question?
I have a question. First of all, folks, great session. Practitioner's point of view, my compliments. Amazing, amazing insights. My question is, as RBI and MAS, the Singapore financial regulator, are rolling out international cross-border CBDC, where the rubber hits the road for, let's say, an Indian citizen traveling to Singapore and using this particular CBDC, what does it translate to? Does it translate that if I have got INR in my Indian CBDC wallet and I go to a shopping mall in, say, Singapore, and I scan the QR code, in real-time basis, I come to know the equivalence of INR that will be deducted from my CBDC? What does it exactly translate to for the Indian citizen?
I think your question was more for the UPI payments because CBDC is not linked to Singapore. So UPI is basically underlying is a bank account or a card, right, which typically exists. So what you said is absolutely right. I mean, once I go there, the QR code which is installed in the Singapore shop, that will be able to read my UPI wallet, you know, which would be a Google Pay or Phone Pay, or whichever one I'm using, any bank wallet. And I can easily get the conversion and it can be instantly transferred the money and I can purchase the goods and, you know, kind of walk out of the store. So I think that's the broad kind of understanding which it is envisaged. It's more on the UPI layer, not on CBDC. CBDC will take some time, you know, as we...
That's it. So it's just like today you go to a store and use your international card. So instead of the international card, you're actually using a UPI QR code.
Yeah.
That's it.
So the
Plain
QR
and
code will be accepted on that.
Correct. So it is acceptability of an Indian payment instrument in the overseas jurisdictions.
So essentially, that means that brings in real-time transparency in terms of conversion rates, any kind of interchange fee, any kind of those particular things. So I don't have to wait for the credit card statement to arrive that, oh, I was charged at 52 rupee conversion, while I thought that I would have been charged at 48 rupees, right? Correct. So that becomes real time.
See, वो तो एक है. दूसरा, you know, you are not card dependent. Today, when you go outside, you need either a FX card, you need your debit card, which is allowed for international usage, you need a credit card, which is an international card. Now you need nothing. Your Phone Pay, Google Pay can continue to help you in Singapore just like it helps you in India.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Last question we can take if there's any.
Hi, my question is, so I understand that the CBDC will be on a private blockchain, and then there are a lot of public blockchain also on which certain smart contracts are developed, using which you can trade digital asset or you can lend or borrow digital asset. Recently, there was a project Guardian that was conducted by MAS Singapore, DBS, JP Morgan and SBI Digital Holdings, where they were trying to do foreign exchange transaction on Polygon blockchain using Aave, Arc and Uniswap. So would CBDC be like used on the public blockchain as well, or how do you see its future on the public, or will it be restricted to the private blockchain by RBI only?
So right now CBDC is not on blockchain. Like I mentioned, it's a hybrid model. The top end, which is bank to Reserve Bank, is on blockchain. The bottom layer is a API layer, right? We also need to understand that the kind of volumes which we see in India, I don't think there's any blockchain fabric in the world today which can handle the kind of scale which an Indian payment system may require. UPI is capacitized for 1 billion transactions a day. We would probably be at what, 1/10 or?
No, we are already at 8-9 billion transactions a month.
Yeah.
So it will be like 30 billion transactions, will be like a month.
300 billion, 30% already there.
1 billion a day.
30%
So we are already at 8-9 billion transactions a month.
So 300 billion.
33% we are already there.
So which is still
Yes,
70%, right?
70%.
There is no blockchain fabric which can handle that kind of stuff.
Correct. But we'll hit those numbers also.
Which we will. So that is why I'm saying, so before we go to a blockchain kind of model, see, you cannot compare कि यार Bahamas ने launch कर दिया या Congo ने launch कर दिया. You know, these are not relevant from a Indian payment ecosystem standpoint.
But I think one thing I wanted to add here is, just to add on to what Ajay is saying, see, although currently it is not on blockchain at the last mile out there, at some point when you look at cross-border commerce, it will be blockchain entirely. there will be interoperability on the, see, currently although it's on private blockchain, but you'll have an interlinking of private and public blockchains because it depends on other CBDCs, how they are being designed, how they have been architected out there. Assuming that, for example, you have something in Singapore which has been architected on a Polygon, this thing. So you'll have a hybrid model where ultimately the shift of an IP address from basically one blockchain, private blockchain to a public blockchain. And there you can have a universal registry being created, where you are having a universal mapper, which maps like something similar to what you have for internet traffic, right? Your IPv4 and IPv6 traffic, you can have a similar kind of a thing for your blockchain also. So you have a global mapper for IP, all the IP addresses out there from private to public. How do you want to migrate? How do you want to do things? And that's the only way you can do commerce because otherwise you can't do commerce out there.
All right. Thank you.
I do one last question.
Yeah, just one question. Firstly, I think fantastic session. One of the best that I've attended in 2 days. Just a very small question, and I know Dewang said this very, very categorically. Case mein to kai industries khatam ho jayenge. One for sure is prepaid, and I kind of agree in a sense. But where do we see the future of some small fintechs coming up who are purely focused on acquiring, right? What is the incentive for them? I think somebody used the word incentive, right? What's the real incentive for them to promote CBDC, right?
Yeah, I think it's a new, ultimately it's more of a business model game, right? Let's look at it. For example, you had other payment players, right? You have PhonePe, BharatPe, everybody. There's almost about 30 to 40 aggregators in the overall payment space, right? There's a lot of crowd out there, but still you have new players coming about. So people are either going and talking about a specific vertical to catch up out there. They're coming out with new models out there. For example, they're bringing in lending along with maybe payments. Similar thing when you look at something like a CBDC coming up, you'll evolve a new business model. I think new things will evolve out there. For example, we spoke about collections. It's like whole pygmy collections and those kind of infrastructure. So you, instead of being a traditional acquiring kind of a player, you could become a different kind of a player out there for supporting this kind of a value chain. But yes, what happens is any new innovation takes time to build up. I think we've been in the payment space for almost 16 years. We started out mobile payments in 2006 or 2007. And we innovated a lot of products. QR code we launched in 2008. We are seeing the light of QR code right now in 2000, maybe about 16 or 17. So a lot of these things, you need to have the patience and the financial wherewithal to be able to bear with it. It's not about just about. So innovation suddenly, and India is a different country altogether. What would work, you do not know, right? It's like basically suddenly things could start exploding and things will just go out haywire. So yes, there's a lot of patience to be done. There could be incentive, but it's clearly a business model game. So you need to look at your own business models out there. What is it that is in it for you? Because ultimately the heart of it, you need to earn money. Because if you're in business, you're not there for charity, right? So if you want to earn money, how do you earn money? As long as you're clear about that, I think you can easily grow that.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. A great session again. Thank you so much for your views and hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.